Welcome to another Zoom podcast. I'm Larry Mack, and we're speaking with Brian Kachejian. Hopefully I said that right this time.
You got it, man. How you
Brian,
doing?
I'm doing good, man. I know you're in New York City. Are you in New York City or New York State?
I'm on Long Island right now, which is just about a half hour away from New York City, 40 minutes away, but I'm in the city all the time.
All
So
right.
I wanted to give you a good old New York welcome. How you doing?
Oh, how you doing?
How you doing?
Well, Brian, you tell me a little bit about what you do with classicrockhistory.com. And let's talk about a little bit about the history. And then I want to find out a little bit more about you too, because looking at your background, I know you love music, and it looks like you love Lost in Space as well.
Oh, absolutely. Anybody who was born in the 60s and grew up as a kid in the 1960s has to love Lost in Space.
Absolutely.
Because there was nothing like Lost in Space on TV. I mean, there was the Irwin Allen TV shows. I don't know if you remember Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Land of the Giants. All those great shows. Do you remember that one?
I had forgotten about them until just now. I can suddenly see them. You know, what's great is I was really into Lost in Space, and then as I got a little bit older, I got into, now I'm geeking out completely. I got into Space 1999. And
that I don't know. That's a TV show?
It was a British TV show that they ran in America, but it starred, it was two of the stars of the original Mission Impossible, Barbara Bain.
Okay.
And then her husband in real life was on Mission Impossible too. He had a very long, illustrious career, passed away a few years ago. Martin Landau, that's his name.
Oh, yeah, Martin Landau, famous actor.
And then everybody else in the show was English. And it was very much, when you watch the special effects compared to what we're used to now with CGI, it was very cheesy. But I got to tell you, as a kid in elementary school, I absolutely loved it. And I had a copy replica of the spaceship. And I think it was around the same time the original Star Wars came out. So everybody was looking for a way to jump on board like Battlestar Galactica.
Right, right, Battlestar Galactica. Yeah, that's the mid 70s. I think the original Star Wars is what, 76, I believe?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you, Brian, and let's talk about classicrockhistory.com.
It's more fun to talk about Lost in Space.
I know. Well, we can wrap it up with that. That's how I was making a nice little bow on this. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Brian, and tell me a little bit about how Classic Rock History came to be.
Well, I started Classic Rock History about almost 10 years ago. And I just kind of started out as something fun to do. You know, as a kid, I used to always make these lists, you know, like here are the top 10 songs of this year, just for myself. I'd write them down on paper and I'd say the top 10 songs in 1974. Oh, boom. And I'd write them down. And so, you know, I've always pretty much made a living as a musician, as a working musician. Mm-hmm. You know, someone who's just played in different bands, played in nightclubs and lounges, pretty much done it all. And so I've always kind of made a living as a musician. And then I went back to school in my 40s, and I got a teaching degree. And so I started working as a substitute teacher, which I still do occasionally. But in the meantime, I decided, let me just try something here on the web, and just for fun. And it took a long time to grow. I built it from scratch. And there are a lot of people out there who will buy websites, mm-hmm. you know, websites that are already, you know, established, and it's much easier for them just to move them in the direction that they want to go, because mm-hmm. they already have an established, you know, audience. Mm-hmm. I just started this from scratch. So the first couple of years, you know, I'd be happy if I got, you know, 100 visitors a month. It takes a long time. Mm-hmm. But over the past couple of years, especially it was during the pandemic is when it really started to grow. Because everybody was at home, everybody was on the internet.
But you do on the website much more than just like top 10 lists. You have those, obviously, but you have a bunch of like articles that you write and stuff like that. Did you start out as a top 10 list kind of thing and then expand, or was it always a mixture of both?
I think it's always been a mixture of both. I mean, I kind of started out with like the top 100, I don't know, singers, rock singers of all time, top 200 bands of all time, just like these big articles. And then I just started to, started to write um, more topic related, like articles that I just wanted to write about, that I enjoyed writing about. Like, to me, the greatest record store of all time was Tower Records. I loved Tower Records. And you're a big rock and roll fan. You
I would spend about half my paycheck at I leave the house going, I'm going to go pick up a record over at Tower or any other record store that I was into. There was always the indie ones that I enjoyed too, but I'd always end up getting that bank notice later on going, hey, you spent too much. I come home with a stack.
right. And you probably dreamed all week long about what records you were going to buy.
Absolutely. And then there
Um,
was times you go in there and the clerk would sit there and go, hey, if you like this, you might like this. So you end up going, oh, and then sometimes I discovered a new band that way.
that's the beauty of places like Tower and the independent record store. You get to know the people there, and you build these relationships with them, and they're the ones that turn you on to new music. I remember being in a record store called Record Stop on Long Island, 1980, and I'm standing there, and I went in to buy, I think it was the new Springsteen album. Um, I guess it was The River, and as I'm looking for the album, I hear this guitar sound that I had like never heard of before, and I'm like, "Who is this?" And the guy behind the counter goes, "Oh, it's this new band called U2," and it was the song "I Will Follow."
Oh,
And I'm like,
wow.
"I've never heard anything like this before." And it was just because he was playing it in the store. And if you remember, the original cover was very ambiguous. They changed the cover over the years. I think now it just has a boy on it. But the original album had four drawings, hand drawings of the members of the band. And there was nowhere in the record that you could see their faces. So there was this mystique about that band, just like there was in the 70s. If you remember, in the 1970s, there was no MTV. We had pretty much no cable TV back then. Cable TV just kind of starts like around 74, 75. So you just had your basic, broadcast channels. So the bands that you loved, you didn't see. You didn't know what they really looked like. You had Circus Magazine, you had Cream Magazine, and of course Rolling Stone. Right?
And
so you
maybe
saw
Midnight Special with Wolfman Jack if you stayed up that late.
that's what we look forward to, right? Midnight Special, and the other one, Don Kirshner's rock concert.
Yep, I do remember that.
They used to goof on him on Saturday Night Live. I don't know if you remember that.
I think Paul Schaefer used to pretend he was him, if I remember correctly.
You remember very correctly. Yes, he used to do a spoof on that. But, those shows would be on, like you said, late at night, usually Friday and Saturday night. And so those were the only times that you ever got to see your bands, unless you saw them in concert.
Yes.
So when a band like U2 came out, you didn't know who they were. They weren't from the States. So just to hear that type of music, something brand new in a record store, for the first time.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a mind-blowing experience.
Record store culture is a very real thing. Unfortunately, it's faded over the last few years, but because of the way music is put out. But there are still those stores out there that you can go to. I've made some lifelong friends, and a lot of times I've met them. They were the clerk at the record store I went to.
Right. Because there was always 3 or 4 guys that would hang out by the cash register talking with the clerk for hours, all night long. I remember one time, I guess it was I'm going to say the late 80s and maybe early 90s, when things were starting to slow down a little, maybe, or maybe it was a little later than that. And I was in a record store called Mr. Cheapo Records. And there was only a handful of people in the store. And the owner says to me, he goes, "Look, business isn't doing well." He goes, "All I have is freaks in the store." So I looked at him and I'm like, "Well, I'm not a freak." He goes, "Yeah, you're a freak. You're here all the time. You're here every day. You're a freak." I was like, wow, I guess I'm in that group,
Do you remember the movie High Fidelity?
Love it. Yeah.
I was dating a young lady at the time. We were leaving the movie theater, and I went, "Oh my God, I know people like that." And she looks at me and goes, "You are people like that."
Right. We don't recognize it. It's just who we are.
It's like, yeah, it's like collecting music, collecting vinyl, collecting, the items like the Lost in Space. I would you would buy stuff and trade, and there was always I walked into a certain record store because I was a huge Pink Floyd fan, but I knew they had bootlegs of live concerts, and I would go
Right.
in there, and some of those bootlegs are worth a lot of money today.
Yeah. When those bootlegs, I mean, they always had vinyl bootlegs, and they were very expensive.
Hmm.
But I remember, I guess it's late 80s when you start to see all the Italian bootlegs, because in Italy, I think it was legal for them to make
Mm.
those CDs.
Oh
There
wow.
were a couple of record companies. I believe one of them was Great Dane Records. And so these record stores, in New York City would get like concerts, like Springsteen concerts, like his
Hmm.
78 tour. There was this very famous bootleg called Piece de Resistance, and it was from his broadcast show. I believe it was the 78 tour. But those bootlegs, those 3 CD sets would be like $100,
Hmm.
and you didn't care. You didn't care if you can get that, you'd buy it.
Oh yeah, I would walk in the store, the clerk would recognize me, and all of a sudden he would go down,
Yeah,
because those were never out in the normal bins.
yeah, they had to keep them hidden.
Yep, because of but it was always cool. They figured out who they could trust. So tell
Yeah,
me a little bit. So obviously, how many people you mentioned you were lucky to get 100 hits at first. How many are you getting on average now at classicrockhistory.com?
I'm saying that I'm probably getting about 500,000 views a month now.
Wow, and it really kicked off during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, the more content that I put up there, I have a pretty big Facebook page that has I think it's close to 60,000 followers. So I post an article on there. Facebook is strange. You never know. Facebook sometimes will just share your article with a million people. I don't know how their algorithms work.
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure it out or anything. But so social media accounts, especially Facebook, really helped. And then, if you have good writing in your articles, Google recognizes that.
I've noticed there's I've seen another author on there. Are you the only author? But it looks like you have a couple people that
Yeah, I have a
contribute to the
lot of
book.
people.
Oh,
Yeah, I have a
really?
lot of different writers, sure. And they're all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Did they start coming to you once they started seeing the success?
I've had a lot of people over the years, contact me, asking if they could write for me. And I'm also a teacher, so I like to give people a shot. I like to give people a chance.
Hmm.
And if somebody's just a nice person, I'll help them out. I'll teach them how to write a little better. I'll show them what to do. I mean, you could recognize talent right away. But there are people that need to have that talent grown. They need help. So being a teacher, I'm always there to help people. But I also use a service. I use a writing service. I hire writers. I find writers because if you're publishing 7 or 8 articles a day, you can't write them all
No, that's a
because
lot of work.
yeah, and there's so much more to running a website. It's not just about writing articles. You also have to promote the articles. You have to set the articles up. You have to figure out what articles you're going to write. So there's a lot to it, and you're dealing also with advertisers. You're dealing with different media companies. Um, so it's a business. So I can't write all that stuff anymore. I just try to pick the fun stuff, write the fun stuff.
So now it's become worldwide because it is
Oh
the
yeah,
World
it's
Wide Web.
worldwide. Yeah.
And like, where have you gotten have you gotten any people who write you about it? Like we were talking off air one time. We were talking about, the fun thing about lists is the conversations that start because of those lists.
Yes.
Um, Where have you had any like I would call them arguments, where somebody doesn't agree because that
You're
sometimes
putting
helps
it
you.
nicely.
What did you say? Iceland?
No, I said that's putting it nicely.
Oh, putting it nicely. And then I like to hit a couple of points because you pointed out somebody famous that one time basically trolled back, and it was kind of like, oh, this is great. But tell me a little bit about what is the furthest part away from where you're at in Long Island that you've gotten comments from? Was it across the world, um, other side of the world in Australia, you know, or is it
Oh
mainly
yeah.
states based?
No, the great thing about Google and running a website is there's something called Google Analytics. So I could see where the traffic's coming. I could see who's reading the articles. I could see the percentages. And so
Mhm.
um, the United States is definitely my biggest audience. And then probably my second biggest audience would be Canada, then the United Kingdom, Australia, um, Germany. Depends on the articles too.
Mhm.
Uh, I remember going to Germany a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of metal there. They love metal music in Germany, it seems.
Yes.
It's and I love Germany. Me and my younger son, we kind of took a train tour of Europe a couple of years back, and we went everywhere. And Germany was one of my favorite places. They had the best meat I've ever tasted.
Oh, wow.
Great steaks, of course, amazing pretzels. Um, but I saw a lot of culture there, and I did notice the love of metal music in
I've
many.
noticed that with some of the bands in like the Norwegian countries. And and
Sure.
and the metal they like is even more extreme. It's like going, wow, okay. So
Yeah.
tell me about like, I'm looking at today, obviously a little bit different. You'll talk about, I love the fact that it's not just the big classic rock artists that you're talking about. I'm seeing here you got something about the Firm. You go into some of the solo works like John Paul Jones, Blue Cheer. You're not sticking with what I call the big four. You're hitting all aspects of it.
It's more fun to hit the lesser known artist
Hmm.
because in the end, it's called classic rock history. And my whole idea behind the site was to turn people on to music that they might not know. You know, I'm trying to turn a younger audience on to all different artists, all different classic rock artists, because younger people, I mean, I work as a substitute teacher sometimes, and I'll be in a middle school, I'll be in the seventh or eighth grade, and I'll ask them, I'll say, okay, what band was Mick Jagger in? And every single kid will say, who's Mick Jagger?
Yeah.
So, but hey, they're only 13, 14 years old. They don't know that stuff. So part of the design of the site and part of the design of the top 10 song list, and I always write this in the introductions, is hey, everybody has their own favorite top 10 songs. We're not saying that these are the greatest songs. We're just saying these are 10 songs that you might want to check out. And if you like these 10 songs, check out the rest of the band.
Hmm.
And so it's designed with that in mind to turn people on to bands that they may have never heard before. If they're young people, they may have never heard um, some Stone stuff. They all know Queen because of the movie.
Hmm.
You know,
Or
every
what I've
single
noticed a
kid
lot
that
with
I
young
know.
people too is there'll be a song that we play on the radio station. They don't know it, but they were at a movie recently, and it was the background music to a very important scene. And they're like, "That was the Rolling Stones." It's like, and then they end up liking it, or that was Black Sabbath, or sometimes an obscure song. They're like, "Wow, I think it was Breaking Bad a few years ago." Trying to remember the name of the band, but one of the oh, I can think of it. It's on the tip of my tongue, but they played this more of a classic hit song, but they played it. It hadn't been heard on radio in years. And suddenly we were getting requests for it because of this TV show.
Isn't that something? Huh?
And,
Yeah.
somebody loved it and said this would be perfect. And, it just, songs can become, what do you call it? Relevant again, years and years later.
Oh yeah, song placement in films. That was a very big thing for a long time. A
Hmm.
really big thing. Um, And now it's a big thing, like you said, on the streaming services, on these TV shows.
I
Uh,
always, for instance, when I think of Layla, I think of now Robert De Niro. I,
oh, okay.
you know,
Right, the scene.
exactly. It's just,
Yeah.
it's amazing how some of that stuff, you see it, and that's where it brings you back to as a movie scene. Or, certain songs still bring me back to high school, tubing down the Salt River, and hearing a certain song and go, oh, I remember I did this when I was, 18 years old, something like that. But it's amazing. You're right. MTV certainly did change things and brought these bands, their faces into our lives a lot more than previous. Because prior to that, you had to wait late at night to see these groups, or if they got pop enough, they'd show up on Bandstand. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I run into a lot of clips from Bandstand from many years ago, and they're all lip synced, you know. Um, but yeah, MTV, I mean, it's been written about so many times. I mean, they were such a huge force in the 80s, and they broke so many artists.
oh yeah,
Would have an artist like Madonna been as big, or Huey Lewis and the News, they
mhm,
were huge on that channel. If that
yep.
channel fell in love with the band, that band was going to just do well.
And you see a lot of videos from them.
Yes,
Hey,
yes.
in my opinion, they reestablished ZZ Top.
Gave them a whole new identity.
Because
And
now, there's the people who I know who think of them as horror, 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 horror. Then the people who think of them as
yes, yes, yes. The videos that they made with the three girls that were in every single video.
and the car.
Yeah, in the car. And
So
they
how?
had I go ahead, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I visited the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame many years ago, and they had the car there.
Oh, they did.
And it was much smaller than you assumed it would be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a small car, but it was right there. And just seeing stuff like that is just
That's really cool. Hey,
gives you
how do
chill.
I'm looking at the website. I've looked at it quite a bit. How do you've been doing it a decade, come up with the topics?
I'm always thinking. I'm always thinking of, what can I write about? I mean, you have certain genres. So you have the top 10 songs, you have the top 10 albums, you have best album covers. So that stuff's easy. Then you could just go through all these different bands.
Mhm.
But it's the more unique stuff. You know, like I came up with one that I enjoyed writing just recently, which was 10 10 living rock artists overdue for a new album.
Oh, okay.
And I thought this will be fun because there's a lot of rockers that I just wish would put a new album out, and it's been too long.
Mhm.
And so I went through this whole list of different people, and I just wrote about it. 10 living, they had to still, of course, be living, otherwise they wouldn't be able to put out a new album.
True. Mhm.
Um, but who do you think was number one on that list? Or who would be number one on your list?
Well, up until a week ago, well, they haven't put out an album yet, would be Pink Floyd. But then
Yeah,
David and Nick dropped that song a week ago, or a week or
right.
two ago. But I guess Supertramp. I'm a huge Supertramp fan, and they
Yeah,
haven't
they're
done
on that
something.
list. They're one of the 10.
Okay,
They're let me just pull up the list. Um, just for fun, if you don't mind
sure, no
going
problem.
through it. I think it would be fun to do it. Okay, so I had at number 10, I had Journey with Steve Perry.
Oh, I agree. Mhm.
You know, those Journey albums with Steve Perry on them were just so good.
Mhm.
Um, and just became such a big part of mass culture. And let's see, at number 9, I had Genesis. It's been a long time
Yes.
since Genesis put an album out. The last one was
Um,
1997.
I'm thinking Bad Company.
Bad Company's on the list. Pretty
All
good.
right.
Pretty good. Now it's going to be tough. The Moody Blues I had on there too.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a long time. They did a Christmas album in 2003, but the last one was 1999. It was Strange Times.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it'll be 20 years I think it's been 18 years now. Fleetwood Mac hasn't put a new album out in a long time.
You are absolutely correct. Yet they still tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2003, Say You Will was their last album.
Wow.
Yeah.
2003 seems like it was 5 years ago.
I know. I
Not
know.
almost 20.
I know. This will probably never happen. The Police, right?
Yeah, they're all still kicking.
Yeah, they did a tour, which blew our minds.
Yep.
You know, they did a tour, but Sting keeps putting new music out.
Yep. But the Police together would be amazing.
Five was Bad Company with Paul Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy Page. Jimmy Page has not put out anything new since pretty much, I mean, they did the Zeppelin Celebration Day, but I'm talking Jimmy Page's solo album.
Yeah, but and it's been a long time since Coverdale Page or Page Plant even.
Right. But Jimmy Page, I don't know if you want to count the Death Wish soundtrack. He's really has only one solo album, which was The Outrider in 1988.
Because John Paul Jones had done a lot of soundtracks and stuff like that, and then has gotten involved with other musicians over the years.
Yeah, you see a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I had him at 4. Let's see who was at 3. I don't remember anymore. Oh, the Kinks.
Oh yeah, they're still.
Yeah, last Kinks album was 1993.
Wow.
Wow, think about that. When Nirvana put out, was Nirvana's first album 93 or 92? It was pretty early, right?
Yeah.
The first Nirvana album.
That was 90. Well, the first big one, Nevermind, was 91.
Okay.
Then they did In Utero. I want to think that was 93. And then after that, Kurt passed.
Yeah. Number 2, and some would argue, well, they just put one out in 2016, but it was the Rolling Stones. The Rolling Stones have not put a new album out since 2005. A bigger band.
Yeah, because wasn't that last one a greatest hits with a couple new songs?
They did. They put a blues album out in 2016. It was a great record, but it's all blues covers.
Oh, but it was a cover album per se.
Yeah, it's all blues covers. Yeah,
not originals.
Yeah, they were trying to kind of go back to their early days when their first album, I think it was their first 2 albums, were all blues covers.
Well, I all of a sudden see this list is getting my brain going, and this is the whole idea of the list and the website. Is I'm all of a sudden thinking to go, well, when was the last time Aerosmith put out a record?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's been a while.
Because I'm thinking it had to be in a while, because I think one of the last records they put out from my memory was that Honkin' for Bobo, which I think was a blues cover album too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a blues covers album. That's right. It's been a while. Steven Tyler put out a country record.
Yes, I remember that.
But the number 1 artist on our list, and it's been since 1993, Billy Joel. Billy Joel is not.
I know that he retired from putting out pop music, as he called it. I remember back then, but he still tours on that pop music and does very well.
He sells out here in New York. He sells out Madison Square Garden every month. He does a sold-out show.
And I can't imagine that a guy like Billy Joel, that his brain just turned off. You know?
He says he just doesn't want to do it.
Wow.
You know?
Oh, man, to see him, to hear a new Billy Joel album would be amazing.
It could have a big effect on the record industry. You never know.
Yeah.
He would bring a lot more people, I think, maybe back into the stores. I don't know.
Yep. It's hard to tell. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. It's almost like the idea of your website is to get conversations like this going.
Right. That's exactly what that's exactly what I try to do. Sadly, it's far fewer people that are friendly and nice about it. Usually people just like yell and scream at me and call me every single name in the book and how could I have wrote this? But I just let it.
Isn't that amazing? And what's supposed to be a friendly, fun conversation, some people take so personal, like your top 10 list has personally attacked them.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, it's just my opinion. You're allowed to your own opinion, and let's start a discussion.
Yeah, I try not to sometimes read comments, although sometimes it's helpful because they'll catch if I make a mistake. They'll let me know if I made a mistake. So it's like having a couple of thousand editors just checking my work all the time. That's
cool.
And I'm fine with that, you
Mhm.
know, just kind of be nice about it. You know, you
Yeah, we had a few years ago, we had a service and they told us it was a certain rock star's birthday. And the service had never been wrong. And I don't have people's birthdays memorized in my head. So I said, hey, today we're going to celebrate so and so's birthday today. And one dude, and he was right. But instead of being nice about it, he just decimated me. And I'm like, hey, dude, all you had to say was you're wrong. And I would have looked at it and went, oh my God, you're right. You know,
yeah. Yeah. Like, come on, you're just human, you know.
you know,
We
I
make mistakes.
I sometimes I don't remember important people in my life's birthday. You expect me to remember, it's like
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's tough. I mean, some of the articles I write about, there's not a lot of information on certain bands. Um, and so it gets tougher to say, all right, well, who played bass on this album? Who played guitar on this album? And because there were a lot of records that were released where, you know, you'd open the record up and it's just a white sleeve,
mhm.
nothing there. There's nothing on the back cover. All right, so how am I going to figure this out? Sometimes it gets pretty tough. And I think I had mentioned to you earlier, I did this article on the top 10 baby songs. And in the article somewhere, I don't think I gave the credit to Michael Corby, who was the guitar player and the founder of the band. I didn't give him credit for playing guitar on a song. And he read the article and he just ripped me apart. I mean, ferociously ripped me apart. And I wrote this great article on the babies and I paid tribute to the band and I put links in the articles to Amazon so they could buy their CDs and just really paid wonderful tribute to a band that I love and so many other people love. And the guy just ripped me to pieces on my website and in a comment. And I could have just trashed it, but I published it and I responded to him in a very, you know, respectful way because that's the type of person I want to be. I don't want to be like that. And I basically just said, well, I can only imagine how you would have reacted if I wrote a bad review. you know,
Yeah.
like I was like, just chill out, man. I said, okay, your comment's published. I'll let everybody else now judge who you are because you just laid it out there, man.
Yeah.
You know,
Could have handled it a different way.
yeah, like maybe say, hey, you know, send me an email or something, say, hey, I play guitar on that. Okay, I'll fix that. And by the way, do you have any new music coming out? Can I help you promote something new? Can I
Yeah.
write about something? You know,
But
just be nice.
yeah, it's interesting watching some of the, you know, like I always like hearing about the band battles, that because it's after a while, some of these musicians, it's their job. And I will talk to some younger people I know, go, oh, well, why just can't why can't they put their differences aside and work together? And I can name like a bunch of musicians who I would love to see get back together. And then it dawned on me, hmm, have you ever worked with somebody that you absolutely hated? And it just made, and then you didn't even want to be in the same building with them? I go, at least at 5 o'clock, you could go home. When these bands are on tour,
Yeah.
so they're living together. And some bands have managed to, put bury the hatchet, put things aside, and they may have 10 different tour buses.
Sure.
But they make it work, and they only speak when they see each other on stage. But there's a lot of bands where they just can't, you know, uh, my favorite band included, it's I see the Roger Waters and the David Gilmour stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, they're never gonna work it out. So,
Yeah, isn't
but
that sad? I mean,
it's really,
what a
really
band
sad.
thing. So they're your favorite band, huh? Do you have a favorite
Absolutely.
Floyd album?
I would say of the Waters era, it's Animals.
Yeah.
I can listen to that album over and over again. I would say, even though it was kind of what I call the big four Waters albums would be Dark Side, Wish, The Wall, and of course Animals is included in there. But Animals really doesn't get the kudos because it didn't, all their songs were 20 minutes, and the short songs weren't really, songs you play on the radio, like Pigs on the Wing. Um, was always, even though it's more of a best of collection, I always loved relics.
Oh,
And
okay, yeah, that's
and even
good.
though that was more the Sid Barrett in their early, like, probably, I just liked it. It just was different to me and showed a different side of them. In fact, in later this year, I'm going to go see Nick Mason's Saucer Full of Secrets.
Oh, that's his band now, Saucer Full of Secrets.
Yeah, so basically what he does, I saw it 4 years ago, and if you're a fan of the early Floyd, he plays nothing but stuff pre-Dark Side of the Moon. And a lot of the members of his band were the touring band of Pink Floyd that would back up David and Rick. And he even has, I want to think, the guy, Gary Kemp from Spandau Ballet.
Okay.
He's in the band. And when he sings, you think it's Sid Barrett.
Wow.
And so then you go, wow, these other musicians that, here's Spandau Ballet guy. I would never think that he'd be into Pink Floyd, but apparently he was. It's just he made more money doing the pop new wave thing, when they came around. And it was just interesting. So I love that type of stuff. And then probably my favorite band outside of Pink Floyd, AC/DC, I love, REM, and then U2.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
and probably an honorable mention from your part of the world, Talking Heads.
Oh, okay, sure. That whole great CBGB scene that originated here in the city.
This may be another conversation with us sometime, but I actually got to sit down with Hilly once.
You did? Wow.
Yes. And
Wow.
I visited New York once back in 2000, got to have a meeting with him and about something. I was working with another musician, and I thought I saw a cat in the corner, and I saw a guy walk up and whack the cat and put it in a bag, and I went, what the? And he goes, no, that was a famous New York City rat.
Yeah.
And Hilly
They
was
made a
very
great
nice.
they made a great movie about him. There was
With
a
Alan
CBGB.
Rickman?
Yes, with Alan Rickman.
Yep.
Wasn't that good?
I thought it was really, really well done. And then the actors or other musicians that they got to play, other famous musicians, were amazing.
Yes, yes. It was I don't want to give anything away, but I love the ending of the movie.
Yes.
The last band that plays. I don't want to
Mhm.
give it away, but you're going,
Yeah, if you get a
wow.
chance, watch that. But I'm trying to remember what it was called. Was it called?
I can't remember. I just saw it recently.
And they did it kind of comic book style, like in
Yes.
the framing of stuff.
It reminded me a little of Ramones Rock and Roll High School in certain ways.
Yes.
But that was a very good film. The girl who played Blondie was great.
It is called CBGB.
It's just called CBGB.
Yep,
Yeah.
just called CBGB. I just looked it up, and yep, there it stars Alan Rickman, who more people would know as the bad guy from Die Hard and as Snape from the Harry Potter movies.
Brilliant actor, gone too soon, But yeah, I think I just saw that. I think it was just on Netflix or something. I said,
Yeah.
maybe this is a documentary about CBGBs, and it was just great film.
I enjoyed seeing all the different people portraying these famous musicians we all grew up with. And my favorite one is Taylor Hawkins as Iggy Pop. So it's like, wow.
Yeah, wasn't that something?
And they even had some other people, like the guy who performed as Joey Ramone. I looked him up and I went, wow, I've seen him in a bunch of movies. Wow, that was a perfect choice.
Yeah, yeah. The
So
Ramones.
well, we're going to wrap things up here real quick, but again, we're going to have your link on our website at klpx.com. Just look for Classic Rock History, the logo. You'll find it, click on it. It'll take you to all these lists and articles. But besides classichistory.com, you mentioned that you're on social media. Where can people follow your stuff on social media?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Classic Rock History on Facebook.
Okay.
And there's my Twitter page is Classic Pop Songs. I wasn't able to get the rock history. It's hard to get names sometimes. That's one of the tough things about putting together something. But mostly just come to the site. Come to classicrockhistory.com. There's contact information on there. We'd love to hear comments, any ideas. My whole idea about this site is it's our site. It's there's a lot of musicians who write on this site.
Mm-hmm.
We're always positive. If there's something that we don't like, we just don't write about it. I don't believe in writing bad reviews. I think that's insulting to artists, you know. So we're pretty much a positive site, you know. It's all positive stuff.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah, I think that's the way it should be, you know. It's tough. It's tough to be a musician, tough to be an artist, and to hear somebody say something so negative about your art or your work. And so
Mhm.
that ain't happening on my site, man.
Well,
You
tell me,
know,
Brian, tell me a little bit real quick before we wrap things up. You're a musician yourself. You
sure, yeah.
mentioned it earlier, but what do you play?
I'm a piano player.
Okay.
And so I spent about 10 years, you know, on the road working in bands and clubs and just making a living playing 5 sets a night, you know, going playing in nightclubs, going on at 10, 11 o'clock at night and finishing at 4 o'clock in the morning. New York, the clubs close 4 o'clock, 4:30.
Hmm.
So you play all night long. And so I did that for a long time and worked with a lot of really cool people, learned a lot about the business. And one of the things that it helped me was now when I'm doing classic rock history, when people ask me, how do I know what to write about? How do I know what was popular? Well, it's because I was on stage every single night hearing people scream, play Guns N' Roses or play Freebird, you know, or, you know, I know what the people love because they were asking us to play that music all the time.
Hmm.
So I was so in the scene. And that's why I like movies like CBGBs because that was part of my life, you know, playing those
Oh,
places and
you probably
shows.
would look at that and go, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah. Yeah, it's the life of a musician is, you know, of a working musician is very different from a rock star musician. You know,
Hmm.
we play the clubs and, you know, we're packing equipment up in a van while bouncers beating somebody up right next to you and people are just falling all over the place and you go home, you sleep all day, and then you do it again that next night. So
I had a similar experience. I was not a musician, but I was a club DJ
so you know.
for years. So
Yeah.
when you said the bouncer beating up, I've been there. I've seen fights happen in front of me where I've had to duck not to get hit by the blood. So,
Yeah. Yes. There are certain clubs when you play, you know not to sing too close to the microphone because you don't want to have your teeth knocked out by somebody being thrown at the stage.
hmm.
You know, in some clubs to wear sunglasses so they don't throw ice at you and they don't get hit in your eyes. You just learn all those little tricks.
Yep.
And so that's the
Yeah, you
life of
probably
a
understood
working.
the what was the old thing where you see the club with the bands playing behind bird wire?
Yes. 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 I mean, there were some clubs in New York City where, you know, I had a club once we were playing and I see this white light coming towards me and I'm like, what is that? And a guy just drove into the club on his motorcycle, just drove right up to the stage and just sat there and just was watching the band, enjoying the band on his motorcycle. You know, just crazy stuff like that. You know,
That's why we love rock and roll.
that's that's rock and roll, man.
Absolutely. Well,
Roll.
Brian, thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. We
Sure.
got the link to classicrockhistory.com on our website, or you can just look for it at classicrockhistory.com, or just look for Classic Rock History on Facebook, and it'll link you back there as well. Appreciate it. And I got some ideas. Like I may call you up once or twice, and a month, and ask you, hey, you want to do a top 10 list, and we can have some fun with that.
That would be awesome. I thank you so much for having me on your radio station. I really appreciate that. This has been a blast.
No problem. So I want you to, I may call you up because I'll be perusing the articles, and if I see one, maybe we can have a little fun on the radio with that.
Or if you have an idea for one, let me know. We'll put it together.
I definitely will.
You
Absolutely, because
know?
I used to do a feature called the Music Grill, and it was not top 10. It was usually here's songs about trains. Here's songs the best harmonica solos. I even found I looked forever to find the one with the best use of the triangle. Stuff like that. Because
Yeah,
you do want to keep it fresh.
that's right. That's right.
And
You'll
then
come up with
sometimes you'll
something.
find something and you think it's stupid, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh wow, that was a treasure trove. I had no idea."
Yes. Some articles you think are just going to flop, all of a sudden go viral. And you're like, how? What happened? People just connect with. You just never know.
Yep, it's
That's
it's a
rock and
lot
roll.
like promoting concerts. Sometimes they sell, sometimes they don't.
Right.
So, well, Brian, thank you so much. Hold on, I'm going to get some other info. But once again, you can check out Brian's articles and all his host of writers articles at classicrockhistory.com. You can find a link right here on this website at klpx.com. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you, Larry.